Okay, we are recording for chapter 20 in the book. Sorry, I was looking at the thing that was telling me the overall chapter number. Um, so it is almost entirely, not entirely, but almost entirely on Tatooine with Anakin finding Shmi and then slaughtering the Tuscans. When he gets there, it is a bit long. Well, a lot of it is more involved than the movie. But when he gets there, okay, it first starts with just Shmi, who has basically retreated into herself because of all the pain that she's suffered. Um, that's the only way to escape it. And really how I'm okay with it being here. I absolutely am. But it is one of those things where it's like, I feel like you could almost argue, well, yeah, she's his mother. Obviously, part of the reason she's clinging on to life is the love she has for him and just the wanting to see him. And it's like, that faint hope there is all that is keeping her there, and it's the only reason she has not allowed herself to die. It's like, I mean, I appreciate being written out, but it's also one of those, I can understand it like being described more subtly than a little bit more than page, but it is, I have no complaint there. I'm just acknowledging that could be done a little differently. I believe I would do it differently, but I'm also not sure if I ever have any intentions for a story that would have something like that. I don't think so. Anyway. Um, One thing that I found interesting was after he got to her, just a comment of "you look so handsome" from her, which I don't remember if that's in the movie or not. Some of these lines are not there. She dies much more quickly in the movie, as I recall. But with her saying that though, it reminded me of Return of the Jedi and how during his death he at least thinks about how I was handsome once, and I doubt it was an actual callback to Return of the Jedi, but it did call me back to that, and I really liked how they described his death. I really thought that was very, very well done. It's part of the reason I said in the previous video even that the final 3 chapters of that book are so good. That is part of it. His death in that. He then sits in the tent with her body, actually for a while. And it's, the way I put it is, this isn't healthy, but it's understandable that he doesn't know what to do. And there's also, where is it? He could hardly move, though. There seemed a profound pointlessness to it all, a series of motions without meaning. At the time, the only meaning, the only purpose that Aang could fathom was that of the rage building within him. Yeah. But it's still just, how he is there is, as that's not healthy, but it is understandable that he does feel lost because he failed to save her. And that really is also while he's sitting there just thinking, grieving, but also brooding, that's really part of how this is unhealthy. He's not thinking, I have to get out of here. He's not thinking, I have to take her body with me. He is just being angry about, he wanted to save her and can't. He wanted to be able to tell her of all the things that he's done and he can't. He wanted her to meet Padme, which technically they had met, but different context to their meeting. Because he knows that she would have loved Padme and Padme would love her. It's like, but now none of that will happen. Yeah. Then he finally, gets up and starts the slaughter. And has the whole 2 Tusken guards outside of the tent because he entered through the back. When he comes out, he kills them, and the rage was not sated. And now we jump to Coruscant with Yoda, with a couple things, well, more than a couple, but he's doing his whole peering through the dark side to try to gain insight into what was going on. Since the way the Jedi are having their sense of the galaxy, sense of the Force clouded by Palpatine, or by accident, I guess, requires them to peer into the dark side. But because of him doing that, it seems, and I actually don't like this. That's because he's doing it. Is how it's explained here. That's why he's able to sense Anakin, because it's described. Uh, where is it? I think that there was. I thought it had been more than just there. Yoda felt a sudden surge of anger, of outrage beyond control. His eyes popped to open wide at the overwhelming strength of that rage. Gets distracted by something. Here it is. But he could not, overwhelmed again by the surge of rage and pain and power. I feel like all the Jedi should have felt something. They might not have known it was Anakin. Yoda being the only one who knows that, although he does mention something to Mace Windu, who comes in and is like, "Are you okay?" Because he does make a noise. It's like, because I'd be good with that if it's Yoda knows and he slipped to Mace, but everyone else feels something, because Anakin should be that powerful that even across the galaxy he could be felt, because he is supposed to be profoundly powerful, and Yoda is feeling this. So, with enough distinction to know it's Anakin, but also something else. And then he heard a voice, a familiar voice, crying, "No, Anakin, no, don't, no." It was Qui-Gon. But Qui-Gon was dead, had become one with the Force. One could not retain consciousness and sense of self in that state. One could not speak from beyond the grave. So, I'll be honest, I've always hated this about the prequel trilogy. How it ends partly in Revenge of the Sith with Yoda saying to Obi-Wan that, it's like, "Oh, yes, I can teach you how you can commune with Qui-Gon." I hated that. It's like, no, this should just be a thing that they can do. We don't need it to be oh, this is something new, or, oh, some special explanation for how this is happening is reason. It's like, nah, it's just we can do that. It's just not necessarily easy. But that the importance, the urgency that Obi-Wan in the original trilogy had for communicating with Luke meant that, yes, he would achieve that. And then Yoda as well later. But yeah, I've never liked that, and they are setting it up here. Maybe we'll get more of an explanation, but it still is, I don't like this because of that. And it is still the whole, it's not supposed to be possible. And it's like, well, clearly it is. We've known that for decades. Anyhow, we have, not them, but it is also, it is setting something else up here that I don't like, because I doubt it's going to happen. And that is, Yoda should pull Anakin aside at some point and talk to him about this, because he knows. Yoda knows. Mace also technically knows, but Yoda, yeah, how did he actually say it? Pain, suffering, death. I feel something terrible has happened. Young Skywalker is in pain. Terrible pain. He didn't tell Mace the rest of it. That somehow Anakin's rush of agony manifesting in the Force had tapped into the spirit of the dead Jedi Master who discovered him. Too much was happening here. But it's the idea that something bad is happening, that is enough for Mace. But Yoda should have such a sense here that Anakin is doing this, that I feel it should be, at some point, they do talk about it. Because I think at one point I had heard that basically Padme knows and Palpatine knows. Anakin only talks to those two, never talks to Yoda about it. And it's like, Yoda should be like, I need to talk to this boy now. I need to. Anyway. So moving on to the slaughter, which is a lot more described than you get in the movie for obvious reasons. And it's rather intense. Soon none was standing against him, all trying to flee. But Anakin would have none of that. He saw one group rush into a hut and reached out across the way to a large boulder in the distance. It flew to his call, soaring across the sand, smashing one fleeing Tusken down and flying on. Anakin dropped it on the hut full of Tuskens, crushing them all. We also had a little earlier. Hang on, where is it? Okay. A third came at him, thrusting forth a spear, but Anakin lifted an empty hand and set up a wall of force energy as solid as stone. Then he shoved out with that hand, and the Tusken spearman flew away, fully 30 meters, smashing through the wall of yet another hut. So, I don't like the sequel trilogy. It is not a good trilogy. They're not good movies. But I do still remember when in the theater, watching The Force Awakens, when Kylo Ren just reaches out and catches that blaster bolt right in the beginning and just holds it in the air and even walks off, and it stays there hanging for a while. It's released sometime later. I remember thinking, oh yeah, I want to see this. This is like, we've reached that point where we can have really cool, awesome demonstrations of the Force. Yeah. And then there was nothing to ever even come close to that in the rest of those movies. I mean, yeah, technically Luke's Force projection in The Last Jedi, which I get people hate that, but it still is like that technically, going across the galaxy and fooling a whole bunch of people. That's actually also pretty neat, but it's not the same. That's an illusion versus I'm holding a blaster bolt in the air. It's like you need to go to video games for other things that come close to that. Like in The Force Unleashed, you rip a Star Destroyer out of the sky and smash it into the ground. That's kind of neat too. And we've never gotten anything like that in the movies. The closest was grabbing the blaster bolt, but yeah. This though, it's like I get how it's evil stuff that you don't really want to be showing off, but at the same time, it's like I wish I could see this. And where was it? There was something. There was something here. It may have actually been in the previous chapter when Padme was thinking about Anakin. I'm not sure where it was, but basically that she could sense. Oh yeah, here it is. If his mother was indeed alive, and she believed that Shmi was, since Anakin had said so, Padme knew that no army would be strong enough to keep the young Jedi from her. I want to see that. And we're kind of getting a glimpse of it here, but it's like, I wish that were in the movies. That we genuinely had, because of his focus, let's say, because potentially not just his anger, but his focus, that an entire army would not be able to stand against him. That's the level Anakin should be at. That's the level a lot of the Jedi should actually be at, to be honest. Well, maybe not a full-on army, but they should be. They can crush their enemies with ease, with a thought. And you never really got to see that. And it is kind of disappointing. I mean, I get the whole you don't want to make them too powerful, but it's also, well, in some ways, making them more powerful but having them always controlled does kind of show a difference between the Sith and the Jedi. That the Jedi are capable of this, but are careful to reserve that for only against those that deserve it. That must be so destroyed. While the Sith will just wield it. So yeah, I wish we could have had that, but at the same time, I do understand not wanting to make things just into spectacles. But I do want to get to this. So the whole he's slaughtering has killed all of them. He didn't feel empty any. Well, here, actually, let me just read the previews. And then he was running, his strides enhanced by the Force, overcoming the fleeing creatures, slaughtering them, every one. He didn't feel empty any longer. He felt a strange surge of energy and strength beyond anything he had ever known. Felt full of the Force, full of power, full of life. And then it was over. Suddenly, it seemed, and Anakin stood among the ruins of the encampment, dozens and dozens of dead Tusken raiders all about him, and only a single hut still standing. That'd be the one with his mother's body in it. I'll also be honest, like here, he should... I was kind of expecting that it would describe... I understand why. But that he would have just reached out with the Force and, like, literally crushed the entire encampment, like just everything into the sand and dust around him because of his grief. But then I would have had him doing that sooner than when he is brooding. So the brooding was necessary, and yeah. But it's still the way it describes him feeling the energy, him so feeling the force. This is part of the reason why I would really want Yoda to talk to him as well, even though I was thinking he needs to talk to him before this. But it's also, stepping outside of this book, I was reminded of Empire Strikes Back with the whole, you do not know the power of the dark side. It's like, this makes sense for how one could be tempted to the dark side. To feel all that in him. And it actually is interesting, because if we go back a couple chapters, when Obi-Wan was fighting Jango, it referred to how Obi-Wan was just allowing himself to flow with the Force. And so he wouldn't even always be aware of where he... Actually, in the previous chapter as well, because there were some monsters that jumped him, that he would just, like, move his lightsaber. He didn't know why, but he would just do that because he was following the flow of the Force. Whereas here, technically he might still be, to a degree, but it is the feeling of the power of the Force. I don't necessarily feel that has to be... I don't necessarily feel this must be the dark side. But that it could just be the Force is in him, and he is fully calling on it, or at least to a far greater level than he ever has before. And I can see the temptation here, so it will be interesting going forward to see how this is continuing to be talked about, because this could be his great temptation. It could also be, well, yes, it could be a great temptation, but it could be more than just, I want this. It could also be I want to reject this. That this is intoxicating. I must be rid of it. So it will be interesting to see how that works out. And one other thing I wanted to add, I actually meant to say it earlier, but I had forgotten. Anakin too heard the voice of Qui-Gon, imploring him to restrain himself to deny the rage. He hadn't recognized it, though, for he was too full of pain and anger. So just the whole Qui-Gon was reaching out to Anakin. Yoda just happened to overhear. Which, yeah, I'm okay with that. But it is... I do think that that's appropriate, the whole Anakin wouldn't recognize it, partly because he's caught up, but I think you could also argue, yeah, well, he also, my brain is turning off a little bit. It's also been 10 years, and Qui-Gon's dead. Why would Anakin think he'd know him? I mean, even Yoda's confused. So it's like, and that, 10 years is a much shorter time to Yoda, potentially, because he's already 800 years old or whatever, so it's... But, yeah. Yeah, I'm multiple things have bed set up here. I am curious about what will come of them, if anything. I do think that we should, as you're just saying, have him discuss the temptation he feels with this power he has felt, and how he may struggle with that going forward, not just his own guilt over what he has done, but the desire for that power again. But also, Yoda needs to talk to him, and I wonder if he ever will. In the movies, I don't think it's ever even suggested that they talk. But I do know there is no way I could be writing these stories and not make sure I do that. That this is too important, and Yoda would understand. It's like, it doesn't matter that the Clone War has begun. The Clone War has, sorry. That wouldn't matter. Yoda would recognize, no. I need to talk to him. This is... I need... It is too significant. I need to talk to him. So... Yeah, I'm curious. But that is me, not R.A. Salvatore. And it's also not... It is not... Sorry. That is my feeling on it, not his. And also my feeling, not George Lucas's. Who might have been like, no, we can't do that because... can't have that in the movie. So, we'll see what happens. There's, 4 more chapters left? 21, 22, 23, 24. So, yeah. See how it goes. Yeah, bye.